Welcome to High Impact Growth, a podcast from Dimagi about the role of technology in creating a world where everyone has access to the services they need to thrive. I'm Amie Vaccaro, Senior Director of Marketing at Dimagi and your co-host, along with Jonathan Jackson, Dimagi's CEO and co-founder. Today, we have the fourth in a mini-series of episodes about company culture. Dimagi has just completed a process of articulating our company values, which are intended to define how we get great work done together. We want to be as proud of how we get our work done as we are of what we actually do. And as we grow, we need to be clear about that how. Today, Jonathan Jackson and I are speaking to Lucina Tse, Chief Operating Officer, Gillian Javetski, Chief of Staff, Avni Singhal, Senior Customer Success Manager, and Simon Kelly, Director of Server Engineering, to discuss our fourth and final new value, embrace complexity for impact. Enjoy. Our fourth newly articulated value is embrace complexity for impact. And I'll read from this value. Doing this work is by no means straightforward. We often come across forks in the road in our work, the simpler road or the windier road to drive high impact growth. We choose the road for greater impact while always keeping our destination in mind. And then within that, we've got 4 sub-bullets. We believe in the potential for positive change. We are comfortable in the gray. When we fall, we get back up. And we evaluate when to stop. So I'd love to open this up to this group and hear what does this value mean to you? Why is this so important to Dimagi?
I think the work that we're doing is inherently really complex. A lot of our partners are doing extremely complex work, and they're working in really complex environments. So for me, this is a very necessary value, because without this, we wouldn't actually be on that road to greater impact. Our North Star is always greater frontline impact for the work that our partners are doing. And we very often get faced with challenges that they are facing. Like, for example, if there's a government restriction on field data collection, or if a partner is working in a school or in an education institution where learning levels are not consistent, how do we actually bring ourselves to support both of these kind of partners in a way that continues to increase their impact? And I think that's what we strive to do. But at the same time, we're also realistic about how much of control we have in these scenarios as well. So just that bit of evaluating when to stop it's a hard thing to wrap your head around when you're in the middle of a project. But that's when that collaborative process also comes in.
Thanks for that. Simon, do you want to share your take on this one?
Yeah, I think this is possibly one of the most controversial ones, and maybe one of the most difficult ones to play out in the teams, because there is so much complexity, and impact is something that's really hard to grapple with, really hard to measure. It's really hard to predict. And so this comes up often on the tech side and within our product teams, where we're weighing up the impact to the product or the impact to our team of implementing something or doing something against the potential project impact. So how is this going to affect timelines? How is this going to affect the product as a whole when we do this thing that is more complex than something else that we might normally have done? And will it give us the project impact? Does the project really need it? And I think some of those things are really difficult to evaluate, particularly, when we're building applications or we're building things for projects. The ideas that we have or that they have about how things will work or what we need to do, we often need to challenge those and say, is that really necessary? Does that really work on the ground? Have we tested that with users? Not because we don't want to do it, but because we want to get that impact. And sometimes the solutions that we end up with are more complex, or they do require changes to the product to support them. At the end of the day, the end users get the impact out of them, because we were able to do that, because we took the time and effort to figure out what was actually needed, what is going to help, rather than making the users do the workaround, rather than making end users take the hit of complexity. Let's do that in the product and simplify things for the end users.
Like by us embracing the complexity, we're able to offer more simple solutions for our end users. Lucina, what are your thoughts on this one?
I also like how the values link back to one another, because like as I was saying in like the be bold but humble, like if this work were easy, someone else could do it. If we wanted to like do the same thing over and over again, we wouldn't be able to like succeed. This resonates to me on so many different levels in how we work. I think others have already talked about like externally on projects, how this really comes across. This also is really true on our internal teams. So for a company of 250 people, you might think, how complex can you really be? We're really complicated. And so like Amy's nodding her head as like on the operations team, we have staff in more than 15 countries, and to be able to support the projects that we do, to support the hybrid work and remote work, we're allowing that flexibility. But this means so much more complication when you're talking about like, how do we set someone up properly? How can we even pay someone in a region that even comes up? And so across all of our team, this is true, whether it be on our project delivery, whether it be on people operations or on finance. And the reason for that is in order to support the impact we want, like we do have more complicated internal structures as well. And that isn't for everybody. But at the same time, it's really key to us making the impact that we need to make. So this one really resonated with me. One of the areas I do think we can continually do better in is like evaluate when to stop. So when you have the mindset of things are really complicated, plus we want to be bold and make all these great moves, it's sometimes hard to know when we need to stop. It's not actually worth it anymore for the time and effort for our team, but also like this might not actually create the impact we think it will create. We may be overcomplicating things, and maybe this is not worth it in how we do it. And so I think this is something we have to make sure we set up in our processes and whatnot to be able to evaluate so that we can have that safety of, okay, knowing when to stop something going forward.
Such a good point. And I think because we have that sort of like inherent doer nature in our DNA, it's really, we love to start doing things, but the stopping is hard. And there's a real discipline thought process that needs to go into that. Gillian, curious for your thoughts on this one as chief of staff.
It's definitely my favorite. I think it's the most Dimagi, and it's definitely the most controversial. It is a tricky one because we work in an industry where funding and resources are limited in global development. We have to be really, really good at being able to kill 1, 2, 3, 4 birds with one stone in everything that we apply. Sorry to the birds. I'm sure there's a better way of saying that phrase. But so we just had an all hands actually this morning where we had some of our project managers talking about some of the biggest projects we're working on. Some examples that the head of the tech team of that project was giving was, in working on this project in Madagascar, we've been able to really leverage building out our local hosting solution. And to do that is a really tricky thing because we know we likely aren't going to get funding to have extra support to build out our local hosting solution. So we have to be really, really creative and embrace complexity to also leverage work that we have on projects to build out other resources that we can share with the rest of the team. That isn't an ideal answer for people that come to Dimagi. I think one type of person that comes to mind are product managers who want to come in and build this like beautiful solution from the bottom up that they can present. And often they may be frustrated when we say, yep, that's great. There's also like a million other considerations we have to think about in balancing that with like all these other project needs. So one example, when we started working more in the US health market, we're leveraging our same platform, ComCare, to build out our web apps application. We have to build solutions there from a product perspective while also balancing knowing that we have a platform that is being used in a very different context across the world in Burkina Faso, where apps need to work offline and they need to work for non-literate users. And so sometimes there's a lot of complexity that we have to embrace in building out a product like that. And it can be really frustrating. It can be like, I will say, candidly, this is maybe the number one reason why if people do feel like Dimagi is not a good fit for them, it's because of this. It's because sometimes you very understandably want to put like a bow on a box and tie it and wrap it up. And we, on lots of our biggest projects and complex, hairier topics, can't do that. And so I think it's one I'm proud of. And I think, like Lucina, you said as well, there's also things that we can be doing to lean into this more and better define what we mean by complexity, and also knowing when to stop on things.
Yeah, so my take is great to hear from everybody again on this one. I think this is the biggest one that you could disagree with before you join Dimagi. Like, we run an exceptionally complex business and we operate in an exceptionally complex market. And I claim that that's necessary to create the type of impact we're going to have, but you can certainly disagree with that hypothesis. As anybody who joins, say it's one of the best onboardings they've had, super clear, we do a great job with knowledge management, but like, wow, is there a lot of stuff going on? And a lot of businesses, explicitly talk about simplifying things, making sure that you are able to have a really clean, simple business model. And I just don't think that's feasible in our global development work.
This is my least favorite value. I'm just going to say that. I think it's taken me a while to kind of come around to it and like really understand what it means. And I think once I understand it and like accept it, it actually changes how I feel about working at Dimagi. And I think the sub bullet of like, we're comfortable in the gray, I think is so important because, to Gillian, your point, Dimagi attracts really high performing, world-class talent. And these are folks that are used to kind of knocking things out of the park and being done with them, or might be used to that. And you don't necessarily get that in this space, right? These are long-term projects. It's a long-term game, right? And there's so much complexity to be embraced, so that if you come into it expecting a neat, simple, clear outcome and a really clear, like, yes, we won kind of answer, you're gonna be frustrated at Dimagi because it's never that clear, I don't think. And there's always more questions to be asked.
Definitely. And I think another example where this comes up a lot is when complexity is very much outside of our control. Like Simon, I know, and Lucina, you have way more experience in this than I do, but we intentionally run towards taking on the highest impact projects, knowing that of our portfolio of national scale programs, high likelihood half of them are canceled or put on pause or are never picked up again for reasons completely outside of our control. But the next time it comes up, like, we run just as fast to that because we are running not to embrace complexity for complexity's sake, but complexity for the greatest impact. And I think that part is really key, is knowing when if there's a simple solution for greatest impact, we'll run just as quickly. But if the greatest impact comes from that complex route, we're going to always be there.
I like how divided we are on like the interpretation of this one, being the one we were all like, this is most complicated. This is the one we may or may not like, but at the same time, it's a Dimagi. So I actually really like the fact that we all have like a different interpretation of it.
Me too. I think it's the one that, as a chief of staff, I want to be very wary of John not just throwing it around, right? Like, when something hard comes up, you're like, we embrace complexity. And you're like, but, we do, yes. But is it because of the greatest impact? Like, do we know when to stop, right? When is this not working? And so also knowing like how to maybe, Amie, over time, like, you'll get more excited about it. Also know like when we're not overusing it, right? I think that's the balance too.
Yeah. And I think like the we champion balance is like a key kind of like complement to this one, right? Like we can't embrace complexity to the extent that we're burning ourselves out. We need to be also taking care of ourselves. Thank you so much for listening. I know many of you in our audience are engaged in the complex and vital work of improving access to services to create a better, more equitable world. And this is really hard, long-term work. How you do it is as important as what you do. I hope that by sharing some of the thinking behind Dimagi's values through this series, we've offered some insight as you may be looking to align your own organization or team around explicit values. And if Dimagi's culture resonates with you, I encourage you to check out dimagi.com/careers and take a look at our open roles. Thanks so much to Lucina, Gillian, Simon, and Avni for joining us today to unpack Embrace Complexity for Impact. I also want to give a shout out to Dimagi's Values Council, who crafted these values. Avni and Simon, who you heard from today, as well as Clara, Kim, Candice, Kodu, Kai, Zohaib, Juan, and Olivia. A few other notables on this journey are Michelle Melendez, Shane Metcalf, Catherine Turner, Dimagi's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Council, and many other Dimagiers who gave input along the way. That's all for today. Please remember to like, rate, review, subscribe, and share this episode and this podcast if you found it useful. It really helps us grow our audience and our impact. And write to us at podcast@dimagi.com with any ideas or questions. Thanks so much.